Hi, and welcome to my presentation on the Westing game. This is one of my all-time favorite books to use in a classroom. I've used it since 2006, and I've used it with every single group of students I've taught. I've taught grades 4, 5, and now 6 using the Westing game. And depending on the needs of the students and the standards, it really can take this book into a multitude of different directions. I hope that you will give it a chance in your classroom and explore the possibilities. So my two goals are pretty basic. One, I'm going to introduce you to the book in case you've never read it. I highly recommend that you do. And the second is just to give you some instructional ideas for teaching this book. So let's get started. I'm going to keep it pretty simple. This is a book about 16 characters who live in a mysterious apartment building and are competing to become the heir for Westing Millions. This is a story with lots of tangled webs and lots of mystery around those 16 characters. And I can only begin to say, if you have never read it, take an opportunity to read it. And I highly recommend you read it more than one time because you're going to miss details. In fact, it wasn't until this year that I gained insight to a very important detail in the very first sentence of the book. Enjoy. If you have already read it and you're ready to move forward, great. Let's get started. So when you're reading a book, you first got to get your students hooked. You want them to make meaningful connections. So when you're reading a book, you have to decide as a teacher which way you're going to take the certain book you're going to teach. You could do it as a teacher read aloud, or you could do it as a student independent reading assignment or book clubs, or in this case, a whole class read aloud. And I'm going to explain why that whole class read aloud is so important. Because I want my students to become involved. I want them to connect to the characters. So I do a reader theater approach to this by having my students read a character that they've been assigned as if they're reading a script. Now, this means that they've got to be on par with where we're at, because if they miss their line, then they are not paying attention, and they're really quick to catch on that I need to follow along and be where everyone else is. Because unlike a script, it doesn't tell you Barney Northup is talking here or Turtle is talking here. You kind of have to pay attention in order to get that. So by doing this, then the students become very vested in their characters. Now, what I will say about that is this year, I read this book to a guest classroom because I was doing virtual. I wanted to have some one-on-one teaching time with a group of students. So I went in and did this book with a group of students. I taught it to the teachers, 2 groups, and they became so vested in their character at the end. There were tears shed. There was joy at how their characters' lives ended up, because this book does an incredible job of here's the end of the story, but here's what happened next, and here's what happened next. And so they loved that. And it was just a really powerful way for them to really get into the story. I also have my students log about their characters, so journal entry. I have done it multitude of different ways, but I think that this year what I intend to do is do more like you see in the image to the right with Barney Northup, because it gives the students each the opportunity to be a lot more creative. And so I think this will be a really cool way to do that. Each of the 16 characters need a spot, so you might divide the paper into half and you do 2 characters on this page. But a reading journal is a really great way to have them keep track. Also, this story is really amazing for character development because you don't see just one character changing. There's really not one main character, since there are 16 characters. There's several, and several of those characters see change throughout the story, and being able to pinpoint what was the incident that caused them to change is a really good way to bring this story out of the pages of the book. All right, so let's go to setting. So there are 2 main settings in this story, the Westing Mansion and Sunset Towers. I really think that that is a really great way to be able to keep track of what's happening in this story. This year I took a little file folder and I made a little tower, and I did little apartments on each side of that, which really helped them to see who was where when they were trying to decipher clues at the multitude of times that it gave them to try to work through clues. One thing I did when the crime was committed, I created a crime scene in my classroom, and I kept that crime scene up until I got to a certain point in the book, mostly because I wanted the students to go back and look at that and compare it to the details in the story. And that's important because Sam Wessing is found one way, and then later on, there is an important detail about a character that kind of reflects back to that crime scene and the story that Turtle and Theo and Doug are told in order to raise interest and get them to take a dare to go into into the Wessing Mansion. Sorry. I did create a video for my virtual kids, breaking news, Sam Wessing found dead, because I was doing this virtually with some students. I wanted to make sure I had a way to hook them, because trying to get them to read it like a script was a little bit more challenging, and we just kind of kept it with independent reading assignments. So that's the setting. Draw what you see. This is something that I am going to do this year different. Because I did the City of Ember, and this was an example I got somewhere for that book, and I thought, well, this is a great strategy to use with any book, really. And it's really getting the students to draw what they see as you read to them, and then they've got to go back and find the evidence from the story and put it with that item. So as you can see here, page 46 is pointing to that, or page 46 to that, and so it really gives them a good way to look at that piece of evidence and also use some inferencing skills and some visualizing skills, all powerful tools for a reader. And so I hope that makes sense. Then the plot, this story has a murderer, it has a bomber, it has a mistake, it has a bookie, it's got all of those characters. But it really starts to set the stage at the very beginning with a character called Barney Northrop. And I think if you pay attention, if you've not read this book, you'll really see why I really talk about how chapter 1 is such a pivotal chapter, even though it's so early in the book, to the plot of this story. I did create a plot mountain in the hallway, a big giant one, and as we had rising events, and as we had the exposition, and we had the climax, and the falling action and resolution, we added little cards that the students created, and we put them on there, and we talked about why that was a rising action, why it couldn't be the climax yet, and why is this an exposition instead of the resolution. And so it really gave us some good conversations about what plot was and how to work around plot. So that's a powerful way to do that. All right, so I have created a few things over the years. I have this sheet with all the chapters. Each 2 chapters, I've got some questions, and they have signposts on them. If you're familiar with Notice and Note signposts, really powerful instructional strategy to use in your classroom. Take the time, go through the resources, see what you like, see what you don't like. What I intend to do this year to make this a little bit more techy is I intend to put these questions on like Google Jamboard and let the students go in and collaborate with their answers that way, instead of just having it turn and talk or write the answers down in your notebook. I really want it to be collaborative, and I want to have a footprint of their answers so they can go back to it later and use that. I think that's really an important tool. And in the same handout is a character chart. So if you want to keep everything on one page, you can do that. I also have it as a Bitmoji classroom, and each chapter is broken up so that they can go to that. I also have a level up. I like to differentiate learning in my classroom, and so rather than just doing questions and leaving it at that, I ask the students to learn vocabulary in the story, do activities with plot, do a reading strategy, and then just to show me what they've learned and to assess their understanding of the story and their comprehension and do a one-pager. Those items are also available for you so that you can access those and make your own copies and edit them the way you see fit if you would like to use them. All right, and then who doesn't like a good escape room? To review the novel, I've created one. I have to tell you, it was my very first creation, so it may not be the best, but I do take great pride that it does do what we need you to do to review the characters and the setting and the plot of the story. So it's just a really great way to end this story and have some fun with it. So I know I went through this really quickly. This is just a quick 10-minute book activity. I hope that you find it useful. If you have a book that you like and you want me to create some instructional strategies for it, I love doing that. It's kind of my side gig. I enjoy creating curriculum and instructional resources. But I don't want to add them to Teachers Pay Teachers. I want it to be in a bank of resources free for teachers. And if you want to become involved and share on there, please let me know. I would love to have a collaborative network ready to just share and help each other. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed.